guys, it's Jessica from Peace Love Books, and today I'm here with my November wrap-up. I read so far 28 books. I am filming this on the 29th though, on Sunday, and so I still have about a day and a half of reading left. I will honestly probably only read one more book, and that is my J.R. Ward book, which is this book right here, but I am doing a reading vlog for this, so this will be up on Friday in case you want my thoughts on that. It will not be in this video because I have too many books to talk about and I can't film on Monday, so I'm doing this today. I read 28 books this month and that's very exciting, and I didn't know I read that many. I did read a couple more novellas than I normally do for the Paranormal Romance Readathon, which was at the beginning of this month. We also started our binging Bridgerton read-along, so I've read 3 Bridgerton books so far and I'm on my 4th one and I'm loving that so much. So I have a lot to get to, lots of physical books I read, lots of audiobooks, so I read a nonfiction as well, which, like, who am I? But I'll go ahead and get to everything I read. The first one I read was Pleasure Unbound by Larissa Ione. This one was the first book I read for the Paranormal Romance Readathon, and I think I vlogged it, so I'll link that down below. But this one, our main character is a demon slayer, and she gets injured and taken to a demon hospital, and she's like freaked out. She's raised her whole life to hate demons, they're awful things, and she kills them, and she's like killed them without a second thought. But then she kind of is falling for the demon doctor who helps her and realizes there's more to demons than she thought. This was okay. I ended up listening to an audio. I think I gave it 3 stars. I wasn't that impressed and the romance was just fine. The world was pretty good. I don't know if I'll continue on with it. It's very like old paranormal, early 2000s, so it was nothing super impressive, but I'm glad I read it and we'll see if I continue on. Let me know if you think I should, because it was decent and nothing like amazing. The romance was just okay. It was fun. Then I read the novella Sacrifice by Katie Robert. This is an MMMF vampire novella romance, and in this one our main character is literally a sacrifice. Her father sent her to this house as a sacrifice for this vampire who has to stay there, and then more people come, shenanigans ensue. Very, very steamy. I will say I thought it was just okay. It was very slow throughout the entire book and not a lot of plot. It was a lot of steam and not a lot of plot until the end, and then the end there was this huge twist and it left on a cliffhanger, and I'm just like, I need more. I really wish she released just like one full book instead of a novella, and I know there's gonna be a next novella because it's part of a series. I wish it was all just like piled together, because I feel like we only got the plot at the end, so I ended up giving it 4 to 5 stars. I really did enjoy when we got to the end. I was like, oh my gosh, did that just happen? Like, what's gonna happen next? And it's just, the rest of it though was pretty slow. I really liked it, so 4 to 5 stars is a lot of fun. Then I read The Power of Hades by Eliza Reign. This was our group pick and I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. It was supposed to be a Hades Persephone retelling romance, but it's a series, and in this one there was no romance and it was much more comedic than I wanted it to be. She was kidnapped by Zeus to bring down to Hades, and I guess her and Hades were married before, and her memory was wiped, so she has no idea about that. And she just like really takes it in stride, the fact that she was kidnapped, and I was like, aren't you a little bit more freaked out, like trying to escape or something? And she's put on trial and has to go through these trials to like win Hades, and the trials aren't that interesting. Like, one of them is like hosting a party and so I wasn't that invested in the story. I thought that it was not as like dark and angsty as I thought it would be for a Hades and Persephone retelling, and they barely spent any time together. Like, anytime they were not interacting. I do think that it gets more romance in the later books, but as the first book in the series, 3 out of 5 stars, I wasn't that impressed. The next book I read was Kiss of Midnight by Laura Adrian, and I honestly don't remember too much about this book. I listened to the audio and I remember, I think I gave it 4 or 3, but I'm going to go more with a 3-star because it's very forgettable. It is a vampire romance. Our main character goes to a club, sees some weird things happening, sees these guys like ripping this person's neck apart, and she freaks out, calls the police. No one believes her. There's no evidence of anything that she saw vampires, and so she figures out vampires are a thing. This guy named Lucan is his name. Yes, so he ends up coming to her. He says that he's a cop, so she thinks that he's gonna help her figure out what happened, but they end up having like intense chemistry and passion and hooking up, and she obviously realizes that he lied to her. And in this society, the enemy are like rogue vampires, which I think is really interesting, and so the breed warriors, whatever, they need to protect everybody, and Lucan's super old. He's like one of the original breed warriors, and so he ends up having to protect our main character, and the story goes from there. And so it was fine, but like I said, pretty forgettable. I didn't love it. It kind of reminded me of Dark Lover from the Black Dagger Brotherhood series, where the first book's just fine. I'm hoping they get better. People have told me they get better, so I probably will continue on with the series. I don't know if it's going to be anytime soon, but I didn't love this, but I didn't hate it. Then I read Ravensong, which TJ Klune, book 2 in the Green Creek series, 5 out of 5 stars. I didn't love it as much as Wolfsong. These are werewolf MM romances, and so Gordo's actually a witch, and he has a lot of dark history with the Bennett pack, which is the pack of werewolves that the whole series is about. And Mark is a werewolf, and he is part of the Bennett pack, and they have a past, and then something happens where the werewolves leave. We all know that in book 1 the werewolves left Green Creek, and then they came back, and that's when Ox came into the picture in book 1. And so Gordo was actually associated with them before they left, and then they left him, and then they come back. And so they need Gordo. He's their witch. He's the Bennett witch, and he helps protect Green Creek and protect the pack. And there's villains that carry over from book 1, and things get crazy. And so this was so good, so angsty. This one overlaps a little bit with book 1. So the very beginning, when Gordo goes off with three other werewolves in the first book, they go off to try to find someone. That overlaps in the beginning of this, but we do get a lot of background and a lot of Gordo's past. It's very slow. These are very dense, character-driven novels, but I absolutely love them because I love the characters so much. And so if you want an amazing paranormal romance MM that's unlike literally anything I've ever read, check the series out. Like I said, I didn't love Gordo and Mark as much as I loved Ox and Joe, but I really did love their romance, and I couldn't recommend the series enough, so go check it out. I give it 5 out of 5 stars, but I'm very excited to read the last 2 of the series. Then I read Mating the Huntress by Talia Hibbert, which is another paranormal novella, and this one is a lot of fun. Our main character is part of a family of werewolf hunters, and she is determined to get her first kill. She's not allowed to, though, because it says your first kill will break your heart or something. I don't even remember what it said, will rip out your heart, will something, kill her. And so what happens is a werewolf ends up showing up at a coffee shop, and he mates with her. He's bonded, and he's oh, this is the one I want. And she's freaked out because she knows he's a werewolf, and she's no, but werewolves are bad. They're all soulless, human-eating people, and so she's confused. And she agrees to go on a date with him because she wants to kill him. And so the story goes from there. It is so fun. I really enjoyed this. I think I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars, maybe 5 out of 5 stars. I don't know. It was a lot of fun. It was short, and I'm really excited if we have more in the series because she has a million siblings, but I just really loved the werewolf and how he was just I like you and you're gonna be mine, but she literally tries to kill him. The dynamics were fun. It was short. It was fast. I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it. Then I listened to the audio of Chastely Bitten by Lexi C. Foss, and this one I just found because I was trying to look for Bitten by Kelly Armstrong on audio, and this came up, and I was oh, I'll try this out. She is a blood virgin slave. She's been raised her whole life. She's a human to be a blood slave for vampires, and so she's auctioned off. This guy buys her, but he has this big plan of overtaking people, so she's been trained all these submissive, obedient things to do, and he doesn't want her to do that, so she's very confused. And it's a society where vampires have taken over the human world, so vampires rule everything, and humans work for them. And it was fine. I think I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. The romance was just okay. The story I wasn't super invested in. She continuously, what was really annoying to me was that they had to act like she was still his slave in public, but then they were more equal in private. But every time they got in public and he acted that way, she was oh, of course he never liked me in the first place. Of course he sees me as a slave. How could I ever think that he was different? And it's he's acting. But every time she thought he was serious, and it was really annoying. So that constant back and forth that happened 4 times in the book, I was annoyed with, so I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. But it was interesting. It was definitely unique and a fun paranormal romance to listen to. Then I listened to When the Duke Was Wicked by Lorraine Heath. I got back to my historicals. I was dying for historicals during this whole week of paranormal, and this one, our main character, she's very wealthy, and so she doesn't know how to tell if a guy wants her or for her money. So she enlists the help of her childhood friend. She's been in love with him her whole life, but he got married, had a kid. Trigger warnings for grief and loss of loved ones because he did lose his wife and child to an illness that he thought was his fault, and so he's definitely very damaged from that, and he doesn't know if he'll ever move on. He doesn't want to. He was so good when he was with them, and so he just breaks all of his rules and goes down a bad path, and he's fine, I'll help you, and then is kind of freaked out because he starts liking her, and she's nothing like his wife, and he's how could I be so in love with my wife and then falling for her? And it's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I definitely am excited to try more Lorraine Heath books. I just downloaded an Amnesia romance from her that I'm excited to try out, but I would definitely recommend this. Then I listened to the audiobook of Dear Martin by Nick Stone. This one is short, but wow, does it pack a punch. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I did not expect, I mean, I should have, but I didn't expect it to hit me as hard as it did because something really unexpected happened in this book. I don't want to spoil anything, but when it happened, I was like, that just came out of nowhere, which is the point. Things like that happen out of nowhere and they're so traumatizing, but wow, this was so good. This follows Justice, who is a black student at a very predominantly white prep school, and he has to deal with his identity and people talking about race, and he's very, very intelligent and wants to get into an Ivy League school, and he has a friend who's like, gets angry because he's like, well, Justice only got into this college because he's black and we all know that, and that's not fair, and he doesn't actually think he got in because of his merit and because of how hard he tries, and it's just, it was so good. I really enjoyed this. Like I said, I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I definitely recommend this. Then I read A Duchess A Day by Charis Michaels. This one I was sent an arc from the author, and it was so cute. It is a bodyguard historical romance. She is betrothed to this guy. She doesn't want to marry him. She's tried running away before, and she has to, and so they hire a bodyguard to help make sure she doesn't run away again and ends up marrying this guy because they haven't set a date. She keeps on pushing it off, and he is actually someone who was in jail, and he's in jail because the last person he was escorting as a bodyguard disappeared, and so they put him in jail because they're saying like he was the reason she disappeared, and they're saying, if you help this woman get to the altar and make sure she doesn't run away, we'll forgive everything, you're out of jail, and we'll give you a bunch of money. So he's like, well, I definitely need that. He's taking care of his family, so he needs this job, and so he ends up being her bodyguard, following her everywhere and falling in love with her. She is then trying to find duchesses to marry this guy instead of her because she hates him, and they're all based on the 7 dwarves. So it's really funny. It's a Snow White kind of retelling. It's a lot of fun. I gave it 4 to 5 stars. I really enjoyed their romance, and it kind of turned angsty at the end because like he needs the money and he needs to be out of jail, so he needs her to marry this guy, but he's like, but I kind of like her. So it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. This is Simon and Daphne's story. Daphne is the 4th Bridgerton child out of 8, and Simon is her brother's best friend, and Simon shows up in town and they meet, and he's like, oh, you're Daphne, you're Anthony's sister, I gotta stay away. And then they can't stay away from each other, and things progress from there. Anthony's such an overbearing older brother. There's an almost duel in here because of how overbearing he is, and it's so good. There's that questionable scene at the end. I will acknowledge that. Watch our live show to understand. Julia actually did tell us about her thoughts on that scene today because this was published in the 90s and where that occurred, and I'll link our live show for this book down below, and I'll also link my reading vlog of it. I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 to 5 stars. I didn't absolutely love it. It was a lot of fun. It was definitely more fun in the beginning, and then it turned very serious about halfway through, and like the pacing of it kind of slowed down, and so I gave it 4 to 5 stars, but great start to the series. Then as part of that vlog, I read My Last Duchess by Eloisa James. I've been talking about this a lot. Our main character is the Duke, and he is the father of all the wild children in the Wild something, I always forget the title of that series, but it is the series about all the wild kids. He is the dad, and it is their stepmom slash mom. It's his 3rd Duchess, and so this is a prequel. It's book 0.5, and it's like the parent story from that whole series. And his first wife died, his second wife left him, and he has 8 kids, and he needs a new Duchess, and he sees our main character Ophelia across the ballroom and is like, I want her. So he goes after her. They spend a snowy night together, and then she's like, I can't marry you. She's widowed, she has a kid, she's just like, realistically it's not gonna happen. And so then he decides to court someone else, realizes he loves Ophelia, and it goes from there, and it's very fun, adorable. If you want a Duke who's like goes after what he wants, very fun with a lot of kids, wintry, I would recommend this. I think I gave it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Then I read Bending the Rules by Christina C. Jones. This is the 3rd book in the Wright Brothers series. I've adored the first 2 books. This one was my least favorite. Our 2 main characters were best friends, and the Wright brother is a author and she is a publisher, and I guess he like completely broke the rules of their friendship like 7 or 8 years ago. She literally cut off contact. She's like, you are an awful person and I never want to speak to you again. You betrayed my trust, and she left. And he had an explanation for it, and she didn't listen. And so 8 years later, she finally listened. She's like, oh. And I was just like, you wasted 8 years because you just literally would not listen to him. So that was very, very annoying to me. And just her inability to trust him was really annoying. They reconnect, and their like business connections are another conflict because like, does he sign with her? Is it mean to go sign with someone else because he's an author and she's an agent kind of thing? So it was fine. I didn't love it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was okay. I listened to the audio, but the first 2 in the series were really good and I definitely recommend those. Then I buddy read Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson with Charles from Books on Stereo, and I gave this 5 stars. I think after talking to Charles, I would probably lower my rating. I think he gave it 3, but I was just so obsessed with this book. I could not put it down. It was very dark and gritty and horrifying, but like addicting at the same time. Enchanted is in high school and she wants to be a singer and she's on the swim team. She's just normal. She has a good voice and she goes to a competition and this guy, kind of reminiscent of R. Kelly and all that scandal that went down. His name is Corey. He is like really into her and he like gives her his number and they start texting and then he's like, hey, come on tour with me. And she tells her parents like, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, and really manipulates everybody and everything and manipulates her into these situations. It's so manipulative. That's all I can say. There's so much grooming in here, so trigger warning for that. She is like trapped but thinks it's her fault and thinks it's her choice, and it definitely wasn't, and it's crazy. And so I will say the ending didn't feel as fleshed out as I wanted it to be, especially with like the villain and who was behind everything, but it was so good. We know there's a dead body in the beginning, there's like blood everywhere, and then we go back to Enchanted when she's just first starting this journey. It's just so horrifying and sad, but raw and amazing. I absolutely love this book. I would definitely recommend it. Wow, and I read it in like a day and a half. I could not put this book down. Then I read The Black Flamingo by Dean Atta, and this one is a story about a gay man in England, and he is just going through his identity and who he wants to be, and he wants to do drag and discovering all of that. This was definitely a really powerful, really short read. I'm pretty sure it's written in verse, but I listened to the audiobook, so it went by very quickly. I think I gave this 5 stars. I guess I didn't rate it on Goodreads, which that's weird. But Michael is just trying to understand who he is. Lots of trigger warning for homophobia and racism and bullying, but this was just really good. It's like a lot of short snippets, like vignettes of his life, and so we go from when he's young to wanting to play with Barbie and not getting a Barbie, and his mom finally gives him a Barbie, and then him going to college and figuring out who he is, what he wants to do, what he wants to be. He's all these different identities, so he doesn't know who he really fits with, and so it was really good. Really powerful, really short, but like Dear Martin, just like packs a punch in such a short amount of pages, and I really enjoyed it. Then I picked up Into Thin Air by Jon Krakauer. I only have the dust jacket because I lent this copy to a coworker who wanted to read his like afterword, because I think this is like a different edition where he's added a lot to it, so he has like a 30-page edition that he wrote to it. So this is about the 1996 disaster on Everest, and from Jon Krakauer's perspective, he has experience climbing, and he was going as a journalist to write about his experience. Lots of people died. It was very tragic and traumatizing, and it was really good. I will say it didn't really pick up until halfway through when they reached the summit, and then disaster struck everything, and that was the second half of the book. I read the second half of the book in one night. The first half took me like 3 days to get through, and it was very bogged down by research and facts and stories about people who've been there before and people who were there, and I think I'd like it more if I reread it knowing who everything was now, but when I was reading it, I was like, wow, this is really slow. Lots of facts. Took me a while to get through, so I'm giving it 4 to 5 stars, but like once you hit the middle, I was just like, I cannot put this book down. I'm excited to read more about Everest and that specific incident. It was so good. Crazy. Jon Krakauer did so much research and talked to so many people because his initial remembrance of what happened is not correct, because he was oxygen deprived and like he thought he saw something and said he did, and he really didn't, and he like talked to other people and realized what had actually happened. It's fascinating. I really enjoyed this. I can't wait to read more about Everest. Then I listened to the audiobook of The Culmination of Everything by Christina C. Jones, and this one was a pleasant surprise because the synopsis is like nothing. I had no idea what I was getting into. Our main character, there's trigger warning for grief and loss of a loved one. She lost someone, I'm not going to say who, but she is climbing this mountain for a reason and ends up like falling off the side and getting stuck, and this guy who's Ben, I think he's like a forest ranger, ends up saving her. He's really annoyed because he gets annoyed with people who climb and ignore the rules and who climb inexperienced, and she gets angry, but there's so much chemistry between them. They end up hooking up like really early on, but they really hate each other. And then she takes this wilderness class and Ben's teaching it, and she's staying in a cabin at this mountain, and the story goes from there. It's their their romance together, and he's very jealous when someone else shows interest in her, and she's just trying to heal from what happened to her and decide what she wants to do with her life, and it's a lot of fun. Her family gets involved, which I really liked, and I really enjoyed this one. I think I gave it like 4.5 out of 5 stars. And I ended up reading book 2 like right after this, so I'll get to that. Next, I read The Vicar Who Loved Me by Julia Quinn. This is book 2 in the Bridgerton series. This is Anthony's book. I did not love it as much as I thought I would. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Anthony is falling in love with Kate, who's a wallflower. Her sister is getting married. Well, her sister's like having her season. So Kate and her sister had their season together because they don't have enough money. And she has a really great stepmom. I really loved her relationship with her stepmother, and Kate knows that she's plain, and her sister says, I'm only gonna marry someone my sister approves of. And so Kate and her sister are very close, so all the guys are trying to impress Kate so that they can get to her sister. And then Anthony is a Viscount and he needs a wife, and he's like, I'm not gonna fall in love. My father died when I was young. It was traumatic. And he's like, I'm gonna die when my dad died. Like, that's just what it is. And so he wants to get married to someone, to have kids, but he's not gonna love anybody. Him and Kate fall in love, and I really enjoyed it. It was hard for me to like Anthony though because he was so obsessed with the fact that he thought he was gonna die. And Julia Quinn did have a note at the end though saying like this is very common. If someone has a parent die young, they think like they're destined to die young as well, and it's very traumatizing, which I get. But I didn't love Anthony as much, but there's so many fun, hilarious scenes in here. But like book 1, it was very fun for the first half, and then the second half very much slowed down and became much more serious. So I still love the series though, and I'm so excited to continue on. I loved book 3 as well, which I will get to in a second. The next 2 I read for a reading vlog. So I read Written in the Stars by Alexandria Bellafleur. I was sent this from the publisher. This one is an FF romance. It's sapphic. It is a Pride and Prejudice retelling. We have Darcy and Elle. Elle's an astrologer. She's just this happy, fun person. Darcy is very much a pessimist. She is an actuary, I think, and Darcy's brother sets them up on a date. It goes horribly, but Darcy wants to stop being badgered by everybody to go dating, so she tells her brother it went well. So then they start fake dating because Darcy's brother actually works with Elle, and Elle's like, what are you talking about? So they fake date for Thanksgiving and go into the Christmas season, and it's so much fun. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I do think that it dragged on quite a bit because it's pretty long. It's 360 pages. It didn't have to be that long, but I thought this was so much fun. I just loved they're so different from each other, and one's like the grump and one is just the fun spirited person who just is happy all the time. And I liked how they talked about their past. Darcy definitely has a damaged past, and Elle is struggling with her parents to take her seriously with her job, and it was really fun. I definitely recommend it. Then I read The Roommate by Rosie Danon, and this one and I did not gel well whatsoever. I gave it 2 stars. Our main character just got her PhD and then in art history, and then just moves across the country to move in with this guy she's had a crush on for like 10 years. And then that guy is like, oh, I'm gonna go on tour with my band actually, so you have a new roommate, bye. And it's very frustrating because like she literally spent how many years in school to get her PhD, and then like moves across the country with no job, and then gets a job not even in her major or her PhD, so that was all for nothing. But she's super rich, and so I had a hard time connecting with her because she was so privileged and she was annoying. And she ends up being roommates with Josh, who is a porn star, and it's their romance, and I just didn't care. The book was so slow. It wasn't for me, so I didn't really like their relationship. I really didn't like our heroine. The plot was slow, and I didn't like it, so I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. Then I listened to In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. This was for my Reading Goodreads Top 10 Choice Awards for romance, so I'll link that down below. This one I gave 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed it, but it's not a romance, so I didn't rate it on my romance Goodreads video. This one, our main character has a dream that in 5 years she wakes up in bed with someone else that is not her current fiance, and then it turns out that she meets that guy later on in the current day because she goes back and wakes up and she's like, well, that was weird. So she reevaluates her whole life. This definitely more focuses on her friendship with her best friend, and there's trigger warning for illness and death and loss of a loved one, so make sure you know that going in. It was a lot of this book. I liked it. I mean, like, I flew through this audiobook, so I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It definitely takes a look at life and what you want out of life. Our main character is a successful lawyer, but then she's like, do I want what I'm doing? Do I want the guy I'm with? Am I happy? So it's definitely women's fiction, but I liked it. Then I read Now That I Found You by Christina Forrest. This one is Christina Forrest's new release, and I'm so excited I read say I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Our main character is an actress, and she ends up ruining her career because her best friend does something to ruin her reputation. And so she's kicked off of this movie she's on, her brand deals are all gone, and she's horrified. And so her career's over before it really got to start. So she goes to New York to go see her grandmother, who has also ruined her career as well, and she wants a chance to understand what she should do. Also, she needs her grandmother to agree to do something so she can get a job, and she ends up seeing Milo, who lives with her grandmother and helps her grandmother out a lot, and he's a musician. But our main character is like, why are you here? Like, go away, you're being annoying, this doesn't apply to you. She was very rude to Milo. I didn't like how rude she was and how self-centered she was, but her and Milo then have to go searching for her grandmother because she goes missing, and the story's really fun. I liked how they grew closer together, and their romance was cute. I just love Christina Forrest. She has the cutest romances, and I liked it. So I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I listened to the audio of 9 Rules to Break When Romancing a Rake by Sarah McLean. This one was our Ravished by Romance pick for this month, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Our main character is a wallflower. She's a spinster, actually. I think she's like 28, and her name's Callie. She makes a list of all these things she wants to do to finally live. So she's like, I want to drink alcohol, I want to smoke, I want to fence, I want to see a duel, I want to go to a gambling hell, and she wants to do all these things. And Gabriel ends up like running into her, and he continuously runs into her, and he actually asks her to help his sister like have a season because his sister is Italian, and it is a half sister. Their mother like ran off and it isn't involved in any of their lives, but that's how they're related. And so him and his brother are like, we're gonna give her a season. She needs to come out, she needs to be in England, and she needs to come in society. And so they ask Callie to help her, so Callie does, but then Callie's also trying to try out all these new things, and so Gabriel's always there when she's trying them out, and then they fall in love. I absolutely adore this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I loved their romance. I loved everything that she did. It was so good. So many really cute scenes. I would definitely recommend this from Sarah McLean. Okay. 5 more books. So the next one I read was Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. I read this for a reading vlog, which I'll link down below. This one is, she's a plus size main character, and she does cosplay, and she does fan fiction, and she goes to a date with the actor of the show she does fan fiction for, and he actually is the person that she's been working with their fan fiction for the past few years that she's kind of been falling for, but they don't know each other. She doesn't know that he's the guy that she talks to online. And so he just finished up the last season. It's kind of like Game of Thrones, and she ends up cosplaying that show, and people make fun of her, they fat shame her, and so he's like, hey, she's gorgeous, like go on a date with me. So she says okay, they don't think it's gonna go anywhere, and their relationship was so adorable because like they didn't always really like each other, but they had a lot of chemistry. Marcus was adorable. Marcus has dyslexia, and I adored him so much. Like, he's a new book boyfriend. I loved him so much. He really struggled with dyslexia growing up, but he's learned how to deal with it. He now does like text to speech, but he's an amazing writer, and I love that we have someone who is dyslexic be such an amazing writer. And his parents didn't understand it, which makes me so angry because I am getting my master's in literacy and I'm an English teacher, and so the fact that his parents were teachers and were so rude to him and so mean to him and didn't help him and just saw him as annoying and not trying hard enough when learning to read, I could just go off on that. But I loved how we had that representation and how he's been embarrassed before being told like, oh, here, read this for us, like in an interview, and he stumbles and they make fun of him, and it's like because he has dyslexia, like he can't read fluently in public, and that's not something to be ashamed of. And so I loved his character, I loved their romance. I could not recommend this enough. I give it 5 out of 5 stars. It was so good. And I'm super excited for book 2 because his friend gets book 2 and it's gonna be really good. Then I listened to the audio of An Offer from a Gentleman by Julia Quinn. This is book 3 and it is my favorite. It is a Cinderella retelling, and so Benedict is like the forgotten Bridgerton. Everybody's like, oh, you're number 2, right? Like nobody knows him as Benedict, like he's just a Bridgerton. So one day there's a ball, and Sophie is our main character. She is a bastard child, and so she's raised by her dad, but she is not really acknowledged to being the daughter of him, and her stepmother absolutely hates her, and she is like a servant to her stepmother, and her father passes away, and she continues being a servant to her stepmother, and she sneaks away one day to go to a masquerade at the Bridgertons. Benedict meets her, falls madly in love, but then she disappears. And so years pass, and they meet again, and she's a servant, and she goes to work in his house because he wants her to get a job because he's in love with her. And it's so good. It's so sad because Benedict doesn't realize he can be with Sophie. He's like, be my mistress and we'll be happy. And she's like, no, I will not be your mistress. I will not have a bastard child of someone who is so wealthy, because I went through that and I could never put that make a child of mine go through that. And so it was so sad. It was so good. I loved the romance. I loved everything about this book. 5 out of 5 stars. My favorite of the series so far, but I'm reading book 4 now and it's really good too, so we'll see how that goes. Then I read The Point of It All by Christina C. Jones. This is book 2 in the Sugar Valley series. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. This one was really serious. It deals with illness, graphically an illness, so be aware of that and like thinking of death. And so our main character, she buys a winery, and the guy whose family owned the winery is like, hey, can I buy that from you? And she's like, no, like I just bought it. She like paid cash. She's the ex-wife of like a billionaire, and so she ends up like trying to restore the winery, and he actually ends up helping her because he wanted to buy it from her to get it back because it was in his family, but he's not like mad at her for like not selling it back to him. He understands that he's too late, and so he helps her. They fall for each other. I really liked how she had such a good relationship with her ex-husband. Like he's around and like they talk to each other, and it was a lot of fun. Our characters are in their later 30s. They do talk a lot about like life, the kinds of legacy people leave and what they want to do with their lives, what their futures are going to look like. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this audiobook. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read How to Catch a Queen by Alyssa Cole. This one comes out on December 1st, and I give this one 3 stars. So we have our main character who is a king, and he's been raised in this kingdom to only think that the king knows what's best, and his father would go through a new wife every 4 months until he found a true queen, which he never did. And so our main character ended up learning like, hey, I'm not gonna ever fall in love. I'm never gonna find a true queen. Shanti is brought there from like a royalmatch.com website. She's wanted to be a queen her whole life. She's chosen to be his queen, and so they get married, and they really don't talk to each other for the first like 100 pages of this book, and she is kind of put to the side, and so she's supposed to be the submissive queen who does nothing, and our king gets to just like roll and do whatever he wants. He does have an advisor who does everything, and he's like, well, this is tradition, this is how we do things, and it's a very male driven society, and it's not going well though, because like their kingdom is losing a lot of money and they refuse to like do certain deals, and so our king is like, maybe I should change things, and it goes from there. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was very bogged down in the political aspects of the kingdom, which isn't always my favorite in my romances. I want it to be more romance centric. They don't even talk to each other really until 80 pages in, so I thought the romance was too slow. I wasn't invested in their relationship, and the blurb says something that doesn't happen until 50 pages until the end, which also kind of annoyed me, and so it was just okay. The ending just kept on going on and on, so I wasn't that big of a fan of this, unfortunately, but I am excited for book 2 because we have the person who like, I don't want to spoil anything, but someone showed up at the end, and it's going to be a sapphic romance for book 2, and I'm very excited for that romance. So I think I'll like it better because I don't think it's as political as this one, because in that one she's like hunting down a missing princess, so that sounds like a lot of fun. This one just wasn't for me. And the last book I listened to is 10 Ways to Be Adored When Landing a Lord by Sarah McLean. This is book 2 in that series. I gave it 3.5 stars. It wasn't my favorite out of all of them. Isabel runs a house where her father's passed away, and he's tried to like sell her off many times before in like gambling games, and so she is just like, I'm not gonna get married. She runs her household. Her father passed away, so her brother is 10, and he's like the earl now, and so she's in charge of her brother, she's in charge of the household, and she actually helps women on the run, and she like houses them. So like her butler's a woman, her stable person's a woman, and so like everybody working for her is women who are hiding. And so this new girl shows up, and she hires her to be her governess because she's hiding from something, and Nicholas shows up because he is going after the person that's her governess, and Nicholas is the brother of Gabriel from book 1. Nicholas is immediately entranced by Isabella. She like wears pants, she's on the roof trying to fix the roof herself, and he ends up helping her price and identify her marble statues because she has to sell them off because she's can't afford anything in the house, and it's their romance. I didn't love their romance as much as the first book, and it kind of went on a little too long, and there was a lot of mistrust between them because Isabel kept a lot of secrets because she didn't think she could trust him, and then she still was like, I know I can never trust you at the end, which is like one of the tropes I don't like. But I really like the premise that she was like hiding women in her house, and it all pretty much took place at that house because there's a huge storm, and it like floods the roads, so Nicholas has to stay there. I also really like Nicholas's friend, who kind of falls for one of the other girls working there, which I think is really fun, and I hope they have a novella. I don't even know if they do, but that'd be fun if they do. But this was fun, but not my favorite. I did round it up to 4 on Goodreads, so I'm excited to read book 3 though, because it is their half-sister, the Italian girl, her book, so I'm very excited for that. And that was very long, but that is my November wrap-up. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know down below what you read this month and what your favorite was, or what you thought of these books. I would love to hear. As always, thank you so much for watching, and have a good day. Bye.